Hello and welcome to Interact, the session when we talk to you, or the time when we talk to all of you about some topic, some burning topic, and today it is SUVs or sedans. Now this session brought to you by Reliance General Insurance and all of us at Autocar. We are going to be talking to you about whether a sedan or an SUV is a better choice for you. Now for some of you, an SUV might just be it, because just looking at the way the SUVs are growing and just taking over all segments, they seem to be the flavor of the month. But having said that, sedans also do have their place in this market. They do have advantages, and they are in some instances even better than SUVs should you have a choice. But let's talk about SUVs first and how they've just grown, become so hugely popular in recent times. If you go back in time, in history, in fact, our first so-called SUV was the good old Jeep done by Mahindra, and since then SUVs have just, or UVs as they were known then, were just utility vehicles, people movers, designed to transport people all over the country, especially in rural India. And I think slowly what happened is that SUVs became more and more car-like. They ditched their body on frames, they became lighter to drive, they got power steering, they got all the niceties, they were responsive. And I think it's this fact that they were becoming closer to regular cars, sedans and even hatchbacks, that has made them hugely popular. In India, it was, I think, the Renault Duster, I would say, launched in 2012, which kind of put the spotlight on SUVs as an everyday car, not a car that you would want to take out just on the weekend or use it on a rough road or take it to places where roads were really bad. Because before that, quite honestly, all the SUVs, all the body-on-frame SUVs were a bit ponderous to use in town. But with the Duster, which was based on a monocoque, it kind of opened the floodgates to SUVs having absolutely mass acceptance as regular cars. And then we had the Creta, the EcoSport, which kind of spearheaded the mid-size SUV segment, which the Creta did, and the EcoSport kicked off the compact SUV segment. Now these are the two big major SUV segments in the Indian market. Of course, above that you have the body-on-frame ones where the Fortuner rules, and let's not forget Mahindra, the traditional or the homegrown SUV maker, which has really dominated the Indian roads for many, many years, and in some rural areas still continues to do so, obviously has a whole range as well. But today everyone's bringing out SUVs, which was not the case earlier, obviously because they are really very, very popular for reasons just mentioned. But sedans are also making a fight back, because sedans have the advantage of overall being that much more comfortable. Their ride is generally better. Getting in and out is pretty easy. They are quite low. And you have the status of a three-box shape, which Indians just love, especially when you're chauffeur-driven. The kind of image a sedan has is what a lot of buyers like, and that's especially true when you go to the premium end. Today the Mercedes S-Class is really the template for the ultimate luxury sedan, and that's what you kind of, let's say, imagine being chauffeur driven into a red carpet function. And SUVs, of course, are coming in at the luxury end as well, and so there really is this mix of SUVs and sedans, which is constantly taking place, and the difficulty is how do you choose between one or the other. So I think I would like to sum it up in a very simple way. If you're going to be driving mainly in town, you don't have long distance to do, the roads are smooth, take the sedan. They're generally easier to drive, they're easier on the pocket, and of course they're easier to park and that sort of thing. SUVs, if you are driving a lot out of town, if the roads are bad, the ground clearance is an issue, of course that's when you choose the SUV. Again, in terms of flexibility, SUVs offer you a lot more, because you can flip the rear seats down quite easily, you can expand the luggage space, and of course the 4x4 SUVs really let you go to places there's no way a sedan can go. But I think ground clearance is the main driver over here where SUVs really score. But the fact is that even sedans are fighting back with ground clearance. I mean, a car like the Honda Civic, which really in its earlier generation was known for terrible ground clearance, now has fantastic ground clearance. Purely because of our road conditions, you really need ground clearance. So I think sedans also are making a fight back with a lot more choice. They're coming out with a new range of engines. I think traditional sedan manufacturers, again like Honda, have come out with the products like the new City, which are really the template for sedans today. And you've got everyone else as well trying to do a comeback in sedan. So you've got the Volkswagen with the Vento and Skoda with the Rapid. They've been rejuvenated, these 10-year-old models with new engines and very, very attractive prices. Hyundai has launched, again revamped the Verna with a new engine and best-in-class equipment. Maruti is soldiering on with the Ciaz, which is again superb value. So really great choice around over there as well. And you've got even Toyota with the Yaris, which is it's the only real sedan they have, because Toyota known more for its Innova and Fortuner, but they've got the Yaris as well because there is a key market for that. We're not going to be talking too much about compact sedans because they are basically or we should talk a little bit about them, because again they are sedans but with a smaller footprint, basically to meet a tax benefit of cars below 4 meters. That's what compact SUVs do as well. So again, those cars serve a purpose. Basically they don't have too much boot space, but again they are great cars for the city, easy to punt around. A lot of them come with automatics, a lot of them come with with the peppy little engines which make driving that much easier. So I think that's the general wrap up, and I think already I'm getting a lot of questions coming from you guys. So I think let me just dive into that. Again, as I said, SUV or sedan, some might think that's not even a relevant question today because SUVs are so dominant, but sedans do have a place and they sell in pretty decent numbers. So which one should you choose? So kicking off, let's start with Abhilash, who's asked, the question is between costs, practicality and a daily drive experience, which is a better pick in a country like India, a sedan or an SUV? So in terms of cost and practicality, in terms of cost, typically sedans are cheaper than SUVs. Just as a general rule, like to like, they are generally a bit cheaper. It's for two reasons. One, SUVs have a little bit more material cost, so they cost more, but manufacturers realize that SUVs are a little higher up in the pecking order, so customers tend to pay more of a premium for an SUV, and that's why they can charge a little bit more. But again, it really depends on the segment and the product and the specification. For a daily drive experience, I think if, as I said earlier, if it's just going to be city driving, I would say stick to a sedan. But if again the conditions are poor, where you're driving, the roads are bad, high speed breakers, roads tend to get flooded. Now that's a really important consideration, especially in cities like Mumbai, where floods are now pretty common, and that's really where you need a high vehicle to get you through. So again, for that an SUV makes more sense. So it really, there's no one or the other in this case. It really depends on what you are looking for, your usage, your condition, and where you stay. Jinesh asks a good question. Do SUVs offer the same level of safety as sedans do? Now, it's an interesting question. I think in terms of, I would say, passive safety, if SUVs are generally heavier, all things being equal, a heavier car comes out better in a crash. But today, I think, all cars meet a very stringent crash safety norm, which has been implemented from October 2019. All cars have to meet that. But beyond that, looking at an even greater level of safety, typically SUVs, they tend to afford a better safety in crash. But that's just, it's just a generalization. It eventually depends on the structure, on the level of safety equipment in there, and the overall integrity of the platform and the body. But sedans, I think what I would say, might offer a better level of active safety, in the sense you can control a sedan better, and that is very important, because controlling a car and not getting into an accident is much better than being in an accident and then depending on the safety features to save you. So active safety wise, sedans I think are easier to control, and in that sense are better, especially on a wet road. Anirudh is asking, is there any overall difference in maintenance costs for an SUV compared to a sedan? Again, it's it's very hard to say which one is better because there are so many factors that maintenance costs depend on. It depends again on the segment you are in. Obviously, the more expensive vehicles will be more expensive to maintain. It depends whether it's petrol, diesel, so all those factors come into play. But I would say generally an SUV might be a little bit more expensive just because it's heavier. The parts, let's say whether it's a brake or brake pads, stuff like that, they're bigger, they're more heavy duty, so they tend to be a little bit more expensive when you have to replace them. But sedans, especially the smaller ones which are light, compact, generally their parts are a lot less expensive. Francis has a very interesting question. His question is, if I had a Honda City with 175 tires, that's the section width, or an EcoSport with 205 tires, what would you corner more confidently in? Now again, interesting question of, I would say it's overall grip versus center of gravity. I think if you're not pushing it, I would prefer the EcoSport. Don't forget the EcoSport has a great steering as well, which is again very important. It's not just the tires or the height. Grip is obviously more with fatter tires, so I think if you're not pushing it, the EcoSport. But when you start approaching the limit, the EcoSport being that much higher, you would tend to feel body roll a bit more. It would you'd lose confidence on the limit, whereas the City, because of its low center of gravity, and don't forget Hondas are typically low slung, the center of gravity is very low, would give you more confidence if you're really pushing hard. So I would say on a really twisty road, I would prefer the City, or if I'm driving really fast through sweeping corners, again I would prefer the City. Again, yes, the overall grip is not there, but again, even at the limit, the City is a lot more progressive. You don't have that level of roll, which can be quite disconcerting. Vikram's question is Skoda Rapid or Kia Sonet, which one should I pick? Well, I think Vikram, what you've not said is what you're going to be using for and what you're going to be using it for and what your budget is. But I'll tell you, with the Sonet, I think the main thing is budget, because it's really a fantastic car. We've just driven it. We're hugely impressed by how well put together it is, the level of equipment, the refinement. The only downside of the Sonet vis-a-vis the Rapid is space. So be it in the rear or in the boot, you don't have that level of space. So if you're going to be driving it on your own, I would say go for the Sonet. It is more expensive than the Rapid, especially the higher variants, but it's absolutely fully loaded. You've just got everything in it. In fact, you've got equipment which belongs to vehicles a couple of classes higher. You've got a fantastic Bose sound system. You've got drive modes, ventilated seats, even things which you won't use like different traction modes. So really fully loaded the Sonet is, and if you can afford it, you're going alone, that's the one I would choose. So yeah, clearly it's more down to the product really than the fact that it's an SUV and not a sedan. Aslam is in a bit of a quandary. He's looking at a Hyundai, but he can't decide between a Verna diesel or a Creta diesel, and the question is which one should he go with. Again, I think the same kind of rules apply, why you would choose an SUV over a sedan. And you both being Hyundai, they're quite similar in many ways. They've got the same set of engines, though if you're looking at the diesel, but the petrol in the Verna is a 1 liter vis-a-vis a 1.4 liter in the Creta. So in that sense, the Creta has a stronger engine. But I think the Verna clearly is, it's a really quick car because it's very agile compared to the Creta. So if you're driving it yourself, I would say stick to the Verna. It's pretty good with the DCT. You've got all the features. The space at the rear in the Verna is the kind of, I would say, the weak link in the whole package. Creta definitely a lot more space. So if you're going to be traveling with your family or it's going to be a family car, I would say take the Creta. But if you're going to be driving it on your own, stick to the Verna. And of course, if you're going to be driving it mainly on smooth roads, because Creta much better if it's on bad roads. So really, again, that's the kind of consideration you need to look at. Moin's question is again a very general one. He wants to know, are bad road surfaces the main reasons for SUV dominating the market? Largely, yes. because clearly you've got the ground clearance, you've got the big wheels which kind of gobble up potholes, you don't have to worry about speed breakers. But there's another reason why SUVs are dominating. It's just the kind of overall image the SUVs have. They have that much more road presence, and also they've got an elevated driving position which kind of gives you a greater sense of control. So there are these intangible reasons as well, not just practical or product related reasons which make them better or make them so popular. So clearly I think SUVs, it's the whole imagery around it and the way they look, and the fact that you really have a sense of control and power that's made them so popular. Sahil is again another generic question: which one offers more comfort and better ride quality, an SUV or a sedan? Again, it really depends on the car, on the product, and on the segment. So typically you can have sedans which really ride brilliantly and SUVs which ride terribly, and vice versa. There are some SUVs which just soak up everything, where there are sedans with small wheels which will feel every bump and rut. But generally I would say that on a smooth road I would stick to a sedan, because SUVs, because they have tough underpinnings, there's the unsprung mass is generally quite high, and that leads to a little bit of a lumpy ride. But again, this is very generalized. You do get SUVs which kind of counter all that and give you absolutely a fantastic ride. But I would say overall that's just theoretical. Just looking at it from a practical point of view, SUVs can handle bumps much better than a sedan can. Vishal's asking an interesting question: which of the two is a better option for a first time buyer, an SUV or a sedan? So I would say that something like a small SUV is better, because you sit high up, visibility is good, and being a first time car buyer, you may not have that much driving experience, so your judgment may not be sharply honed. So you need to see the edges of your car, and clearly to do that you want an elevated driving position. More important, you want a car with great visibility all around. So some SUVs you can look out from the front, which is great, but the rear, you've got thick C-pillars, they kind of black out your visibility. So really it depends on the product which you're looking at. Again, cars like the Renault Duster with low window lines, fantastic visibility all round. So this inherently become much easier to drive. Sedans, if they are low, you can't really see the road ahead, doesn't give you that same level of confidence. And which one should he be using a turbo petrol engine? Well, a turbo petrol engine gives you a lot of power. It gives you that kind of surge. It's not about going fast, but just makes overtaking that much easier. But some of them do tend to have a little bit of turbo lag, so you have to work around that to understand how the engine responds when you put your right foot down. Again, it's quite easy to get used to. Shivam, his question is: which of the two do you think is more fun to drive, an SUV or a sedan? Well, frankly, I think a sedan definitely is, and on our track day it's always the sedans which do exceedingly well, and the sports cars, of course. We've taken SUVs there, but they aren't meant for really sharp cornering, for driving super fast. SUV is more fun on a bad road, but I think overall, given a great road, I would pick a sedan, purely because the dynamics of a sedan are much more entertaining. Nikhil's question again is on the fun to drive, but he has given a choice between the Toyota Fortuner or Skoda Superb. Which would be a more fun to drive choice? I think simple answer is the Skoda Superb, just because of the kind of car it is. Smooth, great ride, it's very refined, punchy engine, good steering. It just is amazing. Though it's really not a very, how do I say, it's not a sporty handling car. It's got a long wheelbase, but compared to the Fortuner, which quite frankly has a lot of power, the engine is very, very powerful. And but the ride is very lumpy, the steering is quite heavy, and it is a big ponderous SUV. And that comes to the other point actually. Typically lighter cars are much more agile, easier to handle than heavier cars. And SUV, especially those on body on frames, tend to be heavy and that much more ponderous, and makes you work much harder at actually having some fun with them. Shriram's asked a question: is the executive sedan segment completely dead, or is there some hope for revival? Now, it's quite interesting actually, because the executive sedan segment, it kind of, after the mid-size segment, the market just falls off a cliff because the executive sedan segment is so small, it's so minuscule. You've hardly got any players there. You've got companies which have vacated there. Toyota is no longer there with the Corolla. You had even Renault with the Fluence at that time. They've also gone. So just a handful of players there. You've got the Elantras, you've got the Honda City there, and you've got the Skoda Superb. So clearly, I think what we are seeing is that when you get into that price bracket of 15 to 20 lakhs, people prefer to have SUVs. That's just how it is. So I think the executive sedan segment is very limited. I think people, when they want to move from a mid-size upwards, they see an executive sedan as just incrementally better from a mid-size sedan. So I think that's one of the reasons it's really not hugely popular. I mean, you take a Honda City and a Honda Civic, for example. In terms of utility, in terms of even space, and even the way they drive, there's not such a massive jump between a City and a Civic to justify the price jump. Whereas from there, they jump into an SUV and it's a completely different experience, some completely different requirement as well. So I think that's my take on why the executive sedan isn't doing well. Viraj's question is, don't you think the compact SUVs are killing the hatchback segment more than they're hurting sedans? Well, Viraj, yes, they are to a certain extent. I mean, SUVs, compact, big, small, 360 degrees, they're just hammering all segments and grabbing market share from different body styles, hatchbacks included. But it's really more the compact SUVs are targeting the premium hatchbacks. Below that, the mid-size hatchbacks and the budget hatchbacks, frankly, there isn't really any competition. You've got quasi SUVs like the Espresso and the Kwid, but they aren't really SUVs. And as you go lower down, I think, just the budget constraints, the usage, where hatchbacks are used, SUVs can't really compete on that front. So really going down to the bottom end of the market, hatchbacks still rule the roost over there. Mohit's question is there any segment in which sedans are still a better choice over equivalent SUVs? Well, again, it really depends on what you want. So sedans, even a compact sedan, depending on your requirement, if it's just, again, going to be for short hops, for short drives with the family, better value, better than SUVs. But again, SUVs in that segment could be better if roads are bad, you want that slightly elevated driving position. So over there, I think there's no clear-cut winner. But I think where there is a clear-cut winner is when you move upwards, you go towards the absolute luxury sedans, and over there the status, the stature of a sedan is unbeatable. And I'm talking about S-Class, 7 Series, Maybach, that kind of a segment. I mean, even Rolls-Royce, look, they've launched the Cullinan, it's very popular, but I mean, there's nothing to beat the grandeur or the majesty of something like a Ghost, and now they've launched an extended one. So I think clearly as you move higher up, not the exclusivity, but just that majestic feeling of a sedan, the kind of image it has, you can't get that in an SUV. And SUVs also, if they're a little high, getting in and out of it is a little awkward, and it's not as elegant to look at or use as a sedan. Rishabh again has asked a straightforward question, which is better in terms of high speed stability, an SUV or a sedan? I think definitely a sedan because of center of gravity. It's straightforward physics. The higher the car, the less stable it is. But having said that, there are other factors that come into play. It's your track to wheelbase ratio, the overall dynamics of the overall suspension geometry of the car. All that is quite important because I think there's more than just one thing that makes a car stable. But all things being equal, if you had all this in an SUV and everything looked after and everything in a sedan as well, all these factors taken care of, like for like, it's the sedan with a lower center of gravity which would definitely be a lot more stable. Manish's question is the resale value of a luxury SUV better than that of a luxury sedan? Again, there's no real hard and fast rule over here. The resale value really depends on how popular the car is. I mean, today you can get cars which are, flying off the shelves. Obviously, they would have a much better resale value because that's just the way it works. So it doesn't really apply. It applies across the board. It's nothing to do with the body style. Sharang's question is, don't you think a mini SUV is pointless? Wouldn't a sedan or a hatchback be a better option? Well, a lot of body styles today are pretty pointless. I mean, look at the SUV coupes which have really sprung out of luxury SUVs. They just chop off, just lower the roof and charge a premium on it, but there are still people who buy it. So while one might think it's pointless, I think there is definitely a market for all kinds of body styles, and frankly, again, the kind of appeal of an SUV is its road presence, its high seating position, and that can apply across segments, even in sedan and hatchback segments, and even going lower down. That's one of the reasons why the Kwid and Espresso has been popular. So I think we've got time for perhaps just one more questions, and let me see. I think Sudhanshu question is, do you think altered marketing strategies can help sedans find more takers than SUVs? Well, you'd have to be a real marketing whiz, because look, at the end of the day, you can do all the marketing you want, but customers today are really quite smart. They know exactly what they want. And I think they would buy a sedan if it suits their requirements, and there are sedan buyers. But as I said, I think SUVs are really taking over from a lot of segments because they are offering the best of all worlds. So you've got the comfort, you've got the style, you've got the road presence, you've got the practicality, you've got the power, performance, all that. So if that combination fits better than what a sedan can offer, you can do as much marketing as you want, but a customer is really going to go towards SUVs. So really, I think you can do marketing up to a point, but beyond that, I think customers will make their own decisions. But of course, you've got strong brands, sedan brands, again like the Honda City, which has been around for more than 20 years. Cars like the Mercedes range, or the E-Class, C-Class, and S-Class, again, which they are really, how do I say, they are pillars in the sedan segments that they sell in. So again, I think sometimes it's very brand specific, where sedans do better than SUVs, but I think marketing can only do that much. And with that, we'll just wrap this session. Great bunch of questions. I didn't think I'd get so many, but again, I think it's an interesting topic, because especially at a time when SUVs are really ruling our roads, but again, the sedan also has its place with us. So thanks very much for tuning in, and see you again same time next month for another session and another topic on Interact, brought to you by Reliance General Insurance and all of us at Autocar. See you later.